So I was wondering, Lisa, do you have good balance?
Balance, like when I'm standing up?
Yeah.
If I'm concentrating on it, yeah. In general, no. In general, I walk into things and fall over a lot. But if I'm asked to stand on one toe, then I'm very good at it.
Really?
When I used to do Tai Chi, I was always the best at balance. But most of the time, I always walk into everything. If there's something to walk into, I go.
But that's not balance. That's just it's just not seeing things.
Okay, maybe. I don't know.
And because I was wondering when I don't know. I've never actually managed to find the video of when you actually a description of when you got used to the state or anything like that. But I was wondering when it happened. If you say often that the seeker falls away. I was wondering if you could describe that a bit more. Like, in what way does it fall away? And sometimes you say collapse or dissolve, but generally falls away.
It was like I was inside the body. This had been happening for many years, but it was just so big this time. So it had been happening for many years, and I'd just been told every time I tried to repeat it to any teacher, they just said experience, experience, and they basically told me to shut the hell up. So I never talked about it or thought about it, but it had been happening since I was a kid, but recognisably been happening since I was about 25, and there was this car accident, but I knew it. And basically I was just sitting looking at a waitress, and it's not like a self-collapsed as in you notice it, it's just that I was sitting there looking at the waitress, and then she just started getting really, really beautiful. And at first I just the thoughts just thought it was her. The thought reported that it was her, and I was just like, wow, how did I not notice how beautiful she was? And then the whole room began to get really beautiful, and then it felt like all my energy poured forwards, so my sense of self was inside the body, and then it felt like my sense of self began to go into the room, and then it went further and further, and there was nothing that could notice that had happened. I didn't have any recognition that it was happening, it just was happening, like there wasn't any ability at that time to reflect on it. And then it was like it went so far out that my sense of self just completely disappeared, and there wasn't an inside or outside world anymore. And then I sort of walked around for a while, really dazed, and like everything was a little bit confusing. So everything, perspective and movement, was very confusing. But for a long time there wasn't any ability to think or reflect. So there couldn't be any reflection like, wow, this is amazing, or wow, it was just total wow. But there was no ability to think about that. But everything was so beautiful. And then eventually I could think about it, like thoughts could think about that, the difference it was before and after.
So it's interesting. So when you say that everything went, the seeker or the sense of self went forward into the room.
Yeah.
Could you also say that you went backwards?
No, just forwards.
No, I mean your actual self, your true self went backwards.
No, just forward.
No, so you went out into the room.
Yeah. And then as I disappeared into it, it was like it was happening and not happening. It was still and not still. But it didn't have a sensation of going backwards.
So the seeker, the feeling of the seeker falling away, where did it fall to?
Didn't, it's just an expression.
It's just an expression.
Yeah, it just disappeared. It just went further and further out, and then finally it just disappeared.
So further and further out. If you say from your perspective it's going out, but from someone else's perspective that could be you going backwards. You see what I mean?
Sure, I'm sure there's hundreds of ways that it could be expressed. Like
Okay.
one person I heard expressed it said like they said that their head fell off. I was like, I don't think we're talking about the same thing. And then when we explored it, it was a similar thing. But
yeah, there's a group of people that the headless wave.
No, but she didn't mean that. She didn't mean that. That's where you see awareness. She didn't mean that. She meant like she couldn't tell the difference between her and the outside anymore.
Yeah.
Like she no longer had a head. But the headless way tends to be about the seeing of awareness, which is a different thing. That's somebody that sees it.
Sorry, the reason I'm asking these questions is it's got I'm going somewhere with it. Do you know in the brain where the cerebellum is?
No.
It's back here, so it's about fist size. It looks smaller than your fist, and it sits right at the back of your head.
Yeah.
Right. It's a really interesting thing. I've been researching it a lot, and it has more neurons packed into its little size than the entire rest of the brain combined.
Wow.
3.6 times more neurons in that little space than the entire cerebral cortex. And the interesting thing about it is that what they know about it is that it controls balance, coordination, and your position in space. And a lot of the time, obviously, you're talking about space and boundlessness and emptiness and all these things. And I've been searching for years. I spend hours and hours and hours just wandering around in my brain, like mapping it out from within, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And when you describe this way, I'm asking, when you felt like you were going forward, and then everything became beautiful, and then you became in the state that you're permanently in. And you one time you said, very briefly, and you brushed it off, you said, behind everything. It's behind everything. And you said not really behind, but you did say that. You said behind everything there is this. So I'm trying to I want to describe the way the cerebellum works a little bit really quickly. It controls your position in space. And the interesting thing about it is that it has no duality. The rest of the brain is made up of two pieces everywhere. It's two joined together, and it's cross, and it's all dual. Whereas the cerebellum is a singular thing. Its connections are ipsilateral, so that it doesn't cross over like everything else. It just goes direct. So it controls your movement, but directly, it doesn't cross. So it's non-dual. It consumes 73% of the energy of the brain. I'm hypothesizing that in awakening, perhaps, there is a movement, you often say there's a movement, from duality, these crisscrossing brain signals in the neocortex and the limbic system, to the singularity of the cerebellum, as I said, contains more neurons than the rest of the entire brain put together and consumes 73% of the energy of the brain. And it's always doing that. It's always there. It's not, as you say, you always were this. So from the time you were born, the cerebellum was doing its thing in space. And
I would love it if there was a scientist out there that wanted to do a brain test on me. I would love that. I would, because I do think that something did most probably change in the brain. So I agree.
You briefly said that there was a car accident just before.
5 years before, but it didn't hit I didn't get hurt.
Didn't get hurt? You didn't get any whiplash or anything?
I hurt my ankle.
Hit your ankle?
Hit me from the side and crushed the side. It was a lorry.
Do you feel like lorry's a truck? In New Zealand, as growing up, we had a lot of British Do you feel like you're here?
But I would really love to see what happened in the brain, because they also say there's another part of the brain that they suspect that it happens in as well, but that's at the front. It's this bit that goes between the left and the right, and it gets such a charge that at some point it stops going back to the right side or something, and to the thinking side, so it always filters through to the left side, which the left side's connected with oneness.
Yeah,
and the reason that changes, they think, scientists, is because of fear. Because when you sit through a certain amount of pain, then this bit in the brain changes, and that's where they think that all the Buddhist practice came from, of sitting through the pain and not running away from the pain. But, I mean, they're so unsure. They always come to the conclusion that they don't know the brain well enough.
No, and they don't even consider the cerebellum in the back of the head. They don't even. There's actually no. They don't even measure it. They're not even concerned about it. There was a woman who had massive damage to the left side of her brain, and only her right side of the brain was operational. She basically just
yeah. And it went to the, I forget which side it is. So she had damage in the left side, so it went to the right side. So one's the. Okay, but at the end of the day, they don't really understand it.
No, and she describes a lot of bliss, but she doesn't describe what you're describing, the non-dual awareness.
I don't describe the non-dual awareness though. No, I don't describe awareness. I didn't really realise that non-duality was associated with that, but more and more I realise everyone does associate it with that. But there is a similarity there. But even so, these are the side effects that happen in the body. It's still, even if we look at it from an intellectual perspective, it still can't be a world made of two. It's impossible.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I mean, Advaita Vedanta, which is non-duality, the past, it's evolved, I guess, says that the world is not real.
I don't know, actually, to be honest, about Advaita Vedanta, but I'm sure it says something like that, yes. World is illusion.
Yeah. But the whole non-duality came out of Advaita Vedanta, the 8th century. And so what do you think? What do you...
Oh, for sure, the world is
Real?
unreal. No, the world is unreal. It's like every perspective that the world, there is no fixed world. There's appearance happening, but there isn't a fixed world. What one eye sees is completely different to another eye seeing. What the owl sees, what the rabbit sees, what the dog sees, it's all different. There's no fixed reality. But there is appearance happening, but it's not a fixed. It's not like this is real. This is really happening. This is the way it is.
So then you're describing the Tantra view, which is well prior to any of the other Indian philosophies, that reality is relative. There's Brahma or the absolute non-dual reality, and then there's a relative reality.
I don't understand what you said, that I'm describing the relative reality?
Yeah. I'm just trying to place your philosophy, if you like.
I don't really know if I'm saying there's a relative reality, because as soon as you get to it, it's empty. It's kind of a bizarre, like, an impossibility to be able to talk about. I spent a lot of time studying Buddhism, so there's lots of similarities there as well.
Yeah, Buddhism grew out of Tantric teaching, merged with Tantric teachings, especially in Tibet.
And the Buddhist was a Hindu before he was a Buddhist, obviously. Or before he was a Buddha. So they're all so similarly connected.
It all mixes around.
Yeah. So beautiful, the sound of the ocean.
Yeah, it's hypnotic. Just
Yeah.
just most amazing place.
Yeah. Oh.
Am I still connected?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's just...
I'm just sitting still.
I'm looking at you going... We should just say goodbye.
I'm still here. Maybe I move on to another question now. It was nice speaking with you again.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.